Good day, everyone. My name is Victoria McMahon, and welcome to Create a World. Create a World was designed from the field of Tantra Mat and based on the principles of Tantra and Mat. Those principles are about everything operating on behalf of everything else, and everything then being a part of everything else. And when we know we're a part of everything, we recognize the relationship that we're in with everything else. That being human, that being nature, that being all beings, all sentience. And thus everything is given a place. And in that sense of giving ourselves a place today, we know that we operate on behalf of all life, and that we are moving into our next greater wholeness. Today, I wanted to have a conversation with my new friend, Dr. Jim Otis. And it's about moving into our next greater whole while giving place and working on behalf of ourselves, and especially in relationship to our brain and how we have a better brain balanced life. So I want to share within this context of the principles of Tantra and Mat, we created community. And community is not only in this moment, but it is in our whole lifetime. And we welcome you because there's no one else but you that can bring you forward into our conversation. So please use the chat, share your insights, your questions, your curiosities, and join us as we're in a really big container. And the mind is a really big container too. I was thinking about coming on to today's conversation and how sometimes for us, the mind is like what we think is located right here, the brain. And for me, the mind is like the brain, the whole body, the whole response of our whole system. So I'm kind of in that curious place of being in conversation with you, Dr. Jim. Mm. And in introducing you, I'd love people to know that you are a board certified functional neurologist and practiced since the early 80s. And what's unique to you that I truly appreciate is that you specialize in drug-free treatment for people with brain injuries, with strokes, with childhood developmental issues, and all of us that may have problems with sleep at one time, or maybe it's a chronic situation you're in. And through that history since the early 80s, Dr. Jim developed what's called Braintime and patented this particular easy to use at home technology. So we'll spend a good bit of time talking about that and then sharing a sample experience of that. So if you don't have your headset with you, I would definitely take a moment to get your headset because you'll want to listen to the sample and experience his work. He used this particular technology, created it after his former wife suffered a traumatic brain injury. So I'm excited to hear more about how the whole process unfolded. The last couple of things I want to say is not only being a functional neurologist and patenting a beautiful technology, Dr. Jim has also been a meditator for 50 plus years. Mm-hmm. That's a lifetime. So there's a rich vastness about understanding not only the physical brain, but the experience of consciousness. So I'm very curious to tap into that possibility as well. And so he and his wife and his beautiful dog Millie live in the Sedona, Arizona area. So we're just so happy that you've joined us, and welcome. And maybe you could say a few things about how this beautiful introduction brings you here and what you'd like to most share with us today.
Well, thank you, Victoria. My first thoughts are, wow, it's like what a grand topic you're laying out here. And it's fun knowing that you know Laura and Millie, and so there's a heartfelt connection here. So that's great. And we could take this conversation in so many ways. I heard you say that before we got on, and now I hear your introduction and I'm getting it at a new level. We really could take this in so many ways. From the real basic things like, what does it mean to grow in wholeness from a brain point of view? What is the relationship between our brain and our experience in the world, our spiritual experience? Certainly, there's at least a correlation, with what's happening in our brain. And, we can talk about the many different ways of thinking about and experiencing the relationship between brain and consciousness, but there is a relationship. And so at any rate, those are my first thoughts. I'm glad to be here. Let's see where this goes.
Absolutely. And my brain is already twirling with the ideas. It might be part 1, part 2, part 3.
Okay.
We might be in a few conversations over the coming months. That's great. And I also want to encourage our listeners to, what are you most interested in from these ideas we've laid out? So help us guide the conversation. If there's something that's really insightful and curious for you, let us know. Just pop something in the chat. And that said, until we get some intrigue going, Dr. Jim, I'm kind of curious how you got to this point in time.
That's a really big question. Let me come back to that in just a minute, Victoria. What's going through my mind is one way to frame this in the beginning. Just this whole relationship between consciousness and our brain, and then I'll tie it back into how I got here. That's a really good question. This, of course, is pertinent. So we go through our lives and we have different. Our state of awareness is really different if we're sleeping or dreaming or waking or meditating or having a spiritual experience of different kinds of spiritual experiences. We can see that what's happening in our body and brain in terms of EEG and heart rate and like all different kinds of metabolic indicators. And so that there is some kind of correlation. And we're beginning to, from a neurological perspective, be able to identify simply from looking at in some kind of recording, an EEG recording or whatever, what that person, what their experience is like. So we can tell, that person's dreaming, that person's sleeping, deep sleep, that person is meditating. We can even get a sense of what type of meditation is going on. And it's getting to the point where you could put somebody in an MRI and have them think a particular kind of thought, and then get that MRI image, transduce it, send it to across the globe, and stimulate somebody's brain, and they can get a sense of, hey, what that person is thinking about, or what image they're looking at. And so we're getting more and more ability to identify the correlation between the brain and the thoughts. Now, I'm not saying that what's causing what, but and that becomes in a way one challenge is, how do we explain consciousness by what's happening in the brain? And some people think you can't. oh, it's just an emergent property. The brain got, it's all like evolutionary chance. But that inevitably hits a dead end. You can get closer and closer correlations, but you can't really get the make it the brain is causing our consciousness. It's like, I think the most satisfying solution or explanation from my perspective is the brain is a transducer. It's almost like the consciousness is out in the world. The whatever you want to define consciousness is like a field, a radio signal that our brain picks up. Our brain is the hardware that transduces it so that we can experience it. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Those are just some thoughts. And ultimately, I think it's more satisfying that, ultimately this is a whole conscious universe that, we all are one. And we can perceive that more or less clearly depending upon our individual seat of consciousness, which is partly our brain. So we can affect our brain and affect and I think whatever practice we do is culturing our brain so that it can perceive changing our brain so that we can more embody this, our relationship with consciousness in a growth direction. And so I heard you say we're moving into our next greater self. I might not have captured the words, but and from my perspective as a neurologist, said, oh yeah, we are shifting, training our brain, and so we have more and more coherence. We can maintain more and more coherence in the different parts of our brain staying in communication with each other while we're experiencing the world. And so there are some neurological correlates, I guess is the short way of saying this, to moving into our next greater self. I'm going to pause right there, and then
I'm going to take a deep breath because there's so much like impulse in me that I could go in 4 different directions right now. And I'm going to try and pull myself back in. And one of the things that I'm curious and interested about in what you're saying is how we take the expanse of what you just said and kind of titrate it into this notion of better brain balance living. Like there's certain ways that I hear your practices, the practices that we all do, and they may be different ones that kind of help pull that in, and we see the experience of better living through those practices. And I just wonder how that lands for you.
I mean, I think practice is the key. That's the first thought that comes out. Okay, ask me again, and just I'm going to see what gets triggered when you ask me again. So, and the basic thing I got was, how do we titrate, the really big picture into the actual our day-to-day life? Is that?
Yeah. Like, what's a starting place?
Yeah. Okay, our starting place is wherever we are, and it's, and I don't mean that facetiously. I really don't. I don't mean that facetiously. And so, just I think one place is recognizing that all of our actions have consequence, and they all have consequence on the level of our brain, among other things. So every thought perception that we have changes our brain permanently. It'll keep changing. And so whatever we put our attention on, whatever we do in our life changes us. And it will change us, and I'll say by intention, or in a direction of our choosing, or it'll be somewhat random. And there's, and so one thing I think of often is, the evolution up into this point has been, there's more of it's been slower. There's not been as much intention involved with it, for at least for humans. Now we have the opportunity to share information, have discussions like this, and be more intentional about our activity and our practice. Even that word practice, that's an intentional thing. And so what do we do? What's our next step? We do the next best thing that we know to do. And that's just an iterative process. And for me, meditation has been a really big part of my life. It has made my life better over and over and over, just almost an exponential way. And exercise and diet, and it's not different than where we are now. What we are already doing, we start there, and then just do the next best thing we can. Did that? Am I making?
Yeah, I think that's the what I call the overview of it.
Yeah.
And we could get into particulars.
Okay.
And something you said really caught my attention, is the intention and the randomness. And I want to kind of circle back to how you got to this point.
Yes.
And is there a relationship here with the intention, the randomness, that kind of feeds you into this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the formative pieces in my life that got me to this point right now is, when I was 18, I began meditating, and it changed my life. And I began in the TM, whatever it is, tradition. And among other things, and I appreciate this greatly, they paid a lot of attention to the neurology of meditation, and they still have they published almost 1,000 peer-reviewed studies that are really good. They're pushing the limits, are pushing our knowledge of interaction between brain and consciousness. And so I was fascinated by that, the relationship between the physical brain that we can measure with an EEG and states of consciousness and our experience in the world. And then when my first wife, and this was 45, a long time ago, when we were early married, she had a brain injury and she couldn't talk. And she was prolific author, speaker, and so this is a big deal. She couldn't talk, and then as a young doctor, as a young chiropractor, I said, well, okay, let's just see what we can do. And we went everywhere that we could think of. We certainly had all the medical, the CT scans, all that kind of stuff. We went through speech language therapy and physical therapy and those kinds of things. And then we tried homeopathy and acupuncture and you name it, craniosacral work. And nothing really helped. And there were some things that would help for a moment. It's like I could do some really specific, like gentle cranial work, and she could talk for about a minute, and then it'd go back. Or we'd do a procaine injection into the site of some of the sites of the injury, and she could talk, for 2 minutes, but then she'd go back. And so I saw this change in her mental, capabilities, her brain functioning, that were moment to moment depending upon physical input to the brain. Mm-hmm. And then it was really clear to me that our current ability to, in the medical field, both traditional and alternative, to help people with brain injuries was sorely lacking. It was just flashing neon lights. There's something here we can do. We don't know what it is yet. And so that really shifted my whole career. And it just put me on track, and I started focusing my practice on helping people with brain injuries. And then In the 1990s, yeah, like early 1990s, somebody came into my practice and she said, "Hey, I'm getting good results," a brain injured person, with a technology called binaural beats. And it's a sound technology where you listen to headphones and there's you hear a wah 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 that's being generated by a difference between two beats. We don't need to go into it, but it was fascinating to me. So okay, I bought equipment to do that, to start generating binaural beats, and I would try it with brain injury patients and experiment with different ratios of beats and different whatever, to see if I could help more people. And it became really clear to me that binaural beats weren't the best technology, and we could move it with different kinds of stimulation of the brain. But it got me started on looking at frequency in the brain.
Mm.
So then that kind of jump started an area of study and interest for me. And then part of it was I found really quickly that ratios of frequencies made a big difference. And so, for example, ratios show up everywhere in nature. And in particular, I'll use the example of the golden mean, or the phi ratio. And it's just very generative, and it shows up in our body and the distances, and the distance from my elbow to my wrist to my finger is phi. The ratio distance from my wrist to the base of my fingers to the tip of the fingers is phi. The power, the twirl, the spiral shape of the DNA has phi ratios. It's just all over the place. And then I found that, phi ratios of sounds were very helpful. And then especially to neurological function, and especially phi ratios of sounds that were referenced to Schumann resonance, which is the Schumann reference refers to a slight fluctuation in the magnetic strength of the Earth's magnetic field. And it's created by how fast a electromagnetic wave can circumnavigate the Earth. And they can go around 7.8 times every second. And so there's this little hum in the background of the magnetic field, this 7.8 hertz, or cycles per second. And it's kind of right in the alpha brainwave area. So anyway, that it became what's working to help my patients. And then there were thousands of iterations, but that just eventually got me. Those are some of the big choice points, in a way, marker points in my trajectory to get here.
So I know that I'm like totally resonating and humming in a frequency in relationship to what you've just said. My whole body is like, yes, 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 yes. And I'm just gonna bring it in because this entire week, my brain nervous system has been tracking the electromagnetic field, this frequency. I just know it has. I don't know how I know. I know that it's been paying attention, and my experience of being a physical human has been navigating it. Like I feel the pressure on my physical brain with the electromagnetic frequency in relationship. I hear people talking about, I identify myself in a geopathic nature, that I do connect to the rhythms of the earth, and the volcano in Iceland that is about to erupt or might erupt, who knows? But I'm just bringing this forward because when I originally thought about our conversation, it's those moments like this for me that I think with my mental mind that I'm out of balance. but really I'm in a different frequency experience with the electromagnetic field. And maybe that's in balance because it's like we've talked about, moving to the next greater whole of being in relationship to my brain balance living.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, I'm curious, like what does that does that experience make sense? Does it have any particular connection for you, or what you might think about it?
Okay, well, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense because it happened, and you're telling me about it, so it makes sense. So that's just the starter. There's a whole bunch of places we could go here, Victoria. One is, yes, we don't, and we have a felt sense that our connection with the natural world is important. There's generally, most people feel good when they're in nature, and it's a kind of heal. It can be a kind of healing experience. So, and there's studies that show that kids need outdoor time. They do better when they have outdoor time. And if you spend your whole day inside, it affects all kinds of parameters of health. So yeah, that's pretty darn clear. In terms, we just know it by how we feel, and you know it by how you feel. And then in terms of being able to elucidate it, from measure the different components of that, who knows? And I think this is not what you were referring to, but it is really clear now that a lot of the electromagnetic frequencies that our current environment is bathing us in are not healthy. And so that can include the type of light spectrum from artificial lighting. We have a heavy blue light, which definitely affects our physiology. It can affect the cell phone radiation or the Wi-Fi radiation. There is so much evidence coming out now that it doesn't show up on the FCC and the federal regulatory agencies, but it's solid science, and it has been for decades, that stuff is not good for your brain or your health or your reproductive capacity. It's like all kinds of things. It's not healthy. So that again, that's not the electromagnetic. I don't think that's what you were referring to, but it's very real. And that is some areas that we are starting to elucidate the dangers, that we just have to be aware of, and we can mitigate a lot of that stuff. But it really,
Yeah.
it's helpful to be aware.
I wonder if, just curious, if brain time frequencies help us mitigate these kinds
Yeah,
of things that we're maybe aware or not aware of.
yeah, it does. It doesn't replace. The best thing is you do a combination approach. But what the brain time does is it makes our brain, your brain, more flexible. And so, okay, I'm gonna you guide me, Victoria, how nerdy or scientific we want to go. But the simple piece is our brains need to be flexible. We think flexibly. We're doing different things. I'm moving my hand. I'm talking. There's change happening all the time. My brain is changing in order to facilitate all of this. And
Okay. I just want you to know I love nerdy. So
okay, great.
I'll call you my nerdy neurologist.
Great. So we'll go there. Okay. So, I'm guessing if you do, the people you're attracting do as well.
Maybe. We shall
Okay.
see.
Okay. So here we go. So our brain is it's beautifully designed. It's just incredibly beautifully designed. And every cell in our brain, the neurons in our brain, turn on and off many times a second. And what I mean by turn on and off is that they're more able to communicate with their neighbors and then less able to communicate with their neighbors. So it's almost like, okay, I'm social, now I'm not. Now I'm social, now I'm not. And so there's all these different parts of our brain. So when we're sitting here talking and, I see your face, I recognize your face with the right side of my brain. I remember your name with the left side of my brain. I track the conversation with a different part of my brain. So all of these parts of my brain are working together to contribute to this experience. And then when we're done talking, when I shift my experience, shift my attention somewhere else, a different set of neurons are talking with each other. So it's constantly shifting. So there's a flexibility in which parts of my brain, our brain, your brain, are talking with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll tie this back, and we'll end this little nerdy episode for now. So here are these brain cells, one on one side, one on the other. If they want to talk to each other, they've got to be on at the same time. They've got to be coherent. And then when they're done talking with each other, like half a millisecond later, they go out of coherence. Okay. So they're moving into coherence and then out of coherence. And literally, it's not half a millisecond, but it's like half a second. It's constantly shifting. It's constantly shifting. And so that flexibility, our brain cells have to speed up and slow down, and Braintime trains that. That's the short version. So it makes us more flexible, more adaptive to stressors, whatever they are, whether it's electromagnetic or whatever. That was the context of this question. But it makes us more adaptive to whatever the stressors are. So, for example, we need sleep in order to function well. Mm-hmm. If we don't get good sleep, then Braintime can help us function with that deficit better. It doesn't replace the need for sleep. So Braintime can help us function in the face of electromagnetic stress. It's still good. Reduce the electromagnetic stress. Am I painting a
yeah? So I'm curious. It was in my mind, and someone else had that same kind of question. With Braintime, the ratio of sound frequency supports the brain to navigate the sleep, like you said, the lack of. So what I think you're saying is that it supports all kinds of restoration after imbalance or illness, depending on the degree. Yeah. So maybe a little more about that.
Sure. So there's two signs of a good brain, a well-functioning brain. One, there's an optimally functioning brain, or are two things that the brain does. It specializes in doing. One is connecting a lot of diverse parts of our brain. So human brain, through the course of evolution, from algae to primitive animals to mammals to humans, our brains have gotten more and more diverse. So the right and left side of our brain is more different. There are more different specialized areas in the right in our human brain than there are in Millie's brain, my dog's brain, or than in the goldfish brain. And so they're more different, and there's more sophisticated ways that they can communicate with each other and cooperate with each other.
Oh.
Okay. So a well-functioning brain is really smooth it's a well-oiled committee or something. It's a group of people that work well together.
Collaborators.
What's that?
Collaborators.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So that's one thing. And then, so that's an important function. In neurology, we call it functional connectivity. That's a technical term, functional connectivity, how well the different parts of your brain can function together and cooperate.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
I think my left, right, and this back area that tracks are collaborating. I feel like I'm in an example of it, because when you said to me that what my experience of my geopathic nature, that it was just simply that you heard me say that was true for me, my whole body just went into a deep, nourished state of enjoyment, of hearing that what I know is my experience is right.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's
First
almost
basic,
as
isn't it?
if the left, the right, and the back was tracking how that felt so good to hear you
Mm,
say that to me. And
mm.
it's part of like how I would say you're giving me a place. You're giving my
Yeah.
brain and my experience and my being a place that is true and aligned with who
Yeah.
I am.
It's inherently pleasurable. And I think what, what's that's a pretty good indicator when things are pleasurable on a, and I don't mean in a hedonistic way, but you know what I mean.
Contentment.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I'm in the flow.
yeah. Okay, so, you want to follow through? Okay, two more things about and two things
Yep.
about the brain, and
Yep.
and then okay, one sign of a good functioning brain is efficient with what it does. This functional connectivity, it feels good. You're in the flow. That's a really good way of saying it. That's one sign of a really well functioning brain. We're in the flow, and then a second one is we're adaptable. We can change. We can learn and grow.
Mhm.
And so, oh my goodness, we do. In brain and neurological language, we call it plasticity. So the brain changes, neuroplasticity. So in a way, our experience of the world today is different than it was a week ago, than a year ago, than 10 years ago. Wow, we are different people. If we had conversations, with ourselves 10 years ago, different set of friends, different set of beliefs, different set of preferences. I mean, you name it, and different ways of looking at the world and experiencing the world. And it will be way different 10 years from now. And it's like, or 1 year from now. And so that's actually healthy,
Mhm.
to I think, that ability to change is part of a well-functioning brain. And we just want to, and the more flexible our brain, the more easily it can change and grow. And the more easily we can reap the benefits of our spiritual practice, our health practice, our emotional practices, our relationship practices, our, physical health practices.
Yeah, it's not just flexibility of our mind thinking, it's the flexibility of the physical brain itself. And
Absolutely.
I heard both of those in there. So
Absolutely.
I have a curiosity to um, share with you. In some of the people in our community, we practice what are called the creation templates. It's a language of writing that puts us in consciousness connection with source, however you define that.
Mm-hmm.
And we use the phi in the creation templates.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this curiosity about using the formula of phi in this writing practice and how that in impacts, influences. I'm not sure I have the intends what the word is. I don't have it clear. Um, how that might be trackable on an EEG.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, the EEG is going to be constantly changing, and how we, pick out meaningful markers. I don't know. It's a good question. I just don't know the answer.
Well, I think then what it tells me is a further conversation and
Mhm.
exploring it with you might be of interest to a lot of us because we're also um, one of the things that Tantra is the person who brought the templates forward, and that in like 20 years ago, she did some tracking with an EEG, and it's like, would there be, after 20 years of this practice, if you will, would there be more markers? And
Yeah,
so she's definitely going to be curious about this kind of conversation.
I think so. and there's the brain change when you do the tantra mat exercises for 20 years. Your brain will change for sure. And then and so we can there's different ways, Victoria, that people have measured that. One is you can see physical. I'm not talking specific to this practice, but different kinds of meditation practices or different kinds of whatever it is, physical rehabilitation. But for example, with meditation changes and with Buddhist meditation or different kinds of meditation, we see morphological. And what I mean by morphological is the shape of the brain changes. So there can be a greater amount of gray matter in the left frontal cortex or the different area compared to different areas of the brain as a person does a meditation practice.
Okay.
And then so that's one, the morphological or the shape changes. And you can see the same thing in people who practice. There was some good work out of UCLA looking at people with OCD, and they would just do a mental thing of, oh, that's not me talking, that's my my disease talking, or the brain talking, and then they come back and they do these morphological imaging and they see the brain shifting. So it's all kinds of practice. You see the shape changes. And then there's other kinds of markers where you look at the electrical activity, and that's where EEG fits in. And then you can look at different measurements. What's the coherence? In essence, how synchronized together are different parts of the brain. So that's one. How much
are they operating?
Relative to each other?
Incoherence.
Yeah. And so that's a pretty good marker of a whole brain, where generally you want it's a marker of health and resilience when there's more of the brain involved with whatever you're doing, so that there's a whole brain connection that I think relates to what you refer to as a balanced brain living.
I'll tell you a little story. I've been working in the syntax of the creation templates for about 10 or so years. Mm-hmm. And I started noticing what I called divots in my head that would change over time as I was writing. I would check back in every month or 2 or 3, and I'd say, oh, the divot that was here is no longer here, it's over here. And it was the morphology thing that you're talking about is what comes up for me. Because where it used to be, now it's just filled in. It's got its fullness. And so it just makes me even more curious about, like, for you, the TM meditation for 50 years has expanded your consciousness. Mm-hmm. For me, the creation templates have expanded my consciousness. And that's the markers on the EEG or the morphology. There's evidence, if you will, for something happening. I can't say what it is. I can tell you the physical and the perceptual ways in which I know myself are so much different than they were before I started practicing. And even in the last couple of years, it feels like it's an exponential growth of consciousness. And so I'm fascinated by how these different ways of measuring, if you will, just give us a bigger picture, fill in the puzzle pieces a little bit more, for me especially.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if now is like a great time for people to actually experience this.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. And I want to go back and just talk just a little briefly, loop back to the morphology. The studies that have been studied have been the brain inside the skull, not the skull, the physical skull, where you can feel divots, that kind of thing. So that's what's been studied. And there in the past there was more study of what's happening on the outside of the skull, well, like I think you were referring to, and I don't track that. I don't know that stuff so much. So okay, does that just a little tiny thing, but I wanted to
I'm a physical nerd person.
Yeah. I didn't want to leave anybody confused.
Yeah, great. Okay. I appreciate that.
Okay, great. So we're gonna invite people to listen to a sample right now.
Yeah, but I'd like you to kind of set it up a little bit.
Okay, great.
Before we start it. So
then what we're gonna do now, and if you are, whoever's listening, watching this, if you have the opportunity to sit and close your eyes, would be ideal. And what we're going to do is play a sample of sounds that heal. And by way of background, I developed this process called Braintime. First working with people with brain injuries, and then later with a whole set of other kind of conditions that we alluded to earlier. It builds flexibility in your brain by providing sound as a stimulus in a really precisely timed manner. And so you're going to hear beeps of sound. They come in pairs, beep, beep. And the pairs are faster or slower. There's some that are beep, beep, and some that are beep, beep. And each of those sequences, beep, beep, establishes a frequency. And so if you carry it out, beep, 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 if there's 128 milliseconds between 125 milliseconds between two beeps, that's a 10 hertz frequency. Different frequency bands have different effects in our brain. And we referenced this very briefly earlier. Mm-hmm. Some frequencies are more active, they're communication channels, and some frequencies are not active or not as active as communication channels. And the channels have a frequency a ratio between them. There's phi is a really important ratio between frequencies, and then also the square root of phi, and there's others, but phi is a really important one. So we're going to play a number of you'll hear some sounds in a second. And when you hear sounds, your brain is going to shift its rhythm in order to hear the sounds more easily. So if it hears beep, beep, it's going to automatically look for the third beep, 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 beep. It's going to shift in anticipation of that third beep. That shift is what we're looking for in this exercise. It's just exercise. It's asking your brain to build flexibility to shift. Okay. And that's all we're doing. And we're doing that in different frequency bands that are active. And when you then give your brain the ability to shift, it can apply it to anything. It can apply it to learning. It can apply it to thinking, to shifting into healthy sleep, or into help people sleep. It can shift into help you feel calmer, and like a whole bunch of different things, more centered. So anyway, that was a fairly long.
But that's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay.
So just a reminder to everyone, if you can do your headsets so that you can actually let the brain hear just that sound, that's fantastic. And I'm going to ask Dr. Jim and myself to mute ourselves.
And then I'm sorry, just one more thing. Okay. And so when you listen to headphones, the sounds will come on one ear, beep, beep, or beep. And so that helps the efficacy of it. If you don't have headphones, that's fine. Okay. Play it out in the air. That's just totally fine. Yeah. Great. Okay.
Thank you. And just to let everyone know, this sample experience is a little under 4 minutes. So we're going to be here in the listening for about 4 minutes. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion, Victoria?
Uh-huh.
Can I make a suggestion? Oh, okay. And one is I want people to just know there's a lot of silence in here. And so there will be there's not amount there'll be a lot of silence. Just rest in the silence. And then
Breathe.
yeah, whatever. And just rest in the silence. There will be sounds coming, they will come.
Perfect.
And if you know it, if we could go 1 or 2 minutes instead of four. I'm going to leave that to you.
Oh, okay. We'll play that. Yeah, we'll play that by ear. We'll kind of let it morph, and we can turn it off maybe halfway if it feels like the right tone of it. Okay. I'm going on mute. Let's enjoy. I just want to be still.
Mhm.
We have a few more minutes before we close out our conversation. About 5 or 6 minutes. And I want to make sure that people know how to contact you if they want further exploration. So we'll pop into the chat. Support at braintime.com and braintime.com for people. So if you want more, like I do, you can create that connection. I'm really moved. My physical being is, you have left me speechless, Doc Jim. We'll also have your contact information in our YouTube chat.
Okay.
Too.
I'll say a bit more about the program that I'm offering that we've developed. So I have a website called braintime.com, and we offer this and a series of other sounds there. The purpose, our goal is to help you transform your brain in a healthy way, so that then you can live your life in a bigger, more full way. And we offer this as a subscription service, as a membership service. And so it's a $29 per month subscription. And on a practical level, we guarantee you're going to like it. If you try it for a month, if you don't like it, we just refund any reason. We refund that completely. And so there's no long-term obligations, any of that. And there are a series of different exercises, and these are designed, like Victoria said at the very beginning. Generally, we recommend 5 minutes twice a day. So you listen to this one. This is one of the tracks on Braintime for 5 minutes in the morning, and then 5 minutes at night. And it's kind of like, well, right immediately, I felt the stillness. Victoria, wanted to be quiet afterwards. And I imagine most people, there's some kind of relaxing, centering effect. And you're right, it would have been nice to have gone a bit longer. So I felt that pull too. Yeah. But at any rate, that 5 minutes changes your brain. And we can measure really significant changes. If we did an EEG before and then an EEG after that 5 minutes, there's a change. And then what happens is, so you just give your brain a little taste of this, once a day, and then you go through your day. And then the coherence wears off as you go through your day. But then you give it another taste, like 5 minutes in the evening, and then you go through your day. And then over time, the coherence, in essence, the ability to change, the ability to function effectively and efficiently gets better. And no matter what you do with it, if you practice, your martial arts, or you practice your tantra mat, or you practice, whatever it is, you're imbibing more capacity to live into whatever it is you're choosing to do.
I just want to share with you, Dr. Jim, there's a couple of comments that I want you to hear.
Okay, great.
Close out. One person is saying that this really builds a feeling of hope inside myself.
Yes.
Another person was saying, dizzy, body heating up. And then another person said, I hear you speaking of the coherence among thinking, writing, and speaking, potently aligned. Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, everyone. Yeah. More to come, right?
Yep.
So in our final minutes, I really want to thank you. I really want to thank you for being with our community and beyond, and all those in the YouTube channel world that are going to maybe stumble across this, get this shared with somebody else to help people know that they are totally on track and that there is a way to support themselves in restoring their alignment and their beautiful brain balance. So thank you so much.
You're
And
so welcome.
maybe part two.
Bless you, bless the group. This is just awesome.
It's been totally fun too.
Yeah, yeah.
My nervous self is happy.
And if anybody, communicates, just remind us, hey, this was from the Tantra Mat Victoria interview, and oh, good,
Create a world. Create the world. Create your world. Okay. Blessings. Thank you.